students, welcome back to our online studies. Today we are taking biology, and of course, you know me, Uyanne Helen from biology department. Now, for today's topic, we are going to treat flower. By the end of the lesson, you'll be able to define flower, list parts of a flower, identify male and female parts of a flower. Then you'll be able to draw and label a flower. List the number of various parts of the flower. And lastly, list some terms used in describing flower. Now, what is flower? Some of you always see flowers as the ornamental flowers we use in decorating our compounds. But flower is more than that. Now, flower is the sexual reproductive part of a flowering plant. We have flowering plants and the non-flowering plants. But the flower is the sexual reproductive part of a flowering plant. It's from the flower that the fruits we eat develop, because in parts of the flower we have ovary, which is the main thing that forms the fruit we feed upon. Parts of a flower include, we have sepal, which collectively is called calyx, petals, collectively called corolla, androecium, which are a collection of stamens, gynoecium, which is a collection of pistil or carpel. We have pedicel, receptacle, epicalyx, or you call it bracts. Now, the diagram you have before you now is a stamen. In a flower, we have from about 10 to 3 stamens, depending on the kind of flower. It may be between 3, it may be 5, it may be 10. It varies in different kinds of flower. So what you have before you now is a stamen. And the stamen comprises of anther and the filaments. So when we have 10 of them like this, they are collectively called androecium, which make up the male part of the flower. Now, what you have before you again, the diagram is a pistil, or you call it carpel. And this is exactly what you call the gynoecium. This is the female part of the flower. And you can see that it is made up of stigma, style, and the ovary. Now, looking at the whole flower, diagram of a whole flower, the one you have here is a half flower. Why did I say it's a half flower? You can see that the stamens are 5, pistil is 1, petals are 2.5, then sepals are 2.5 as well. For a full flower or a whole flower, you have stamens 10, depending on the kind of flower you have. Like example, the NonEssential you have here on the diagram. The stamens are up to 10, the petals are 5, the sepals are 5, then gynoecium is just 1. So based on this, now you have just 1 female among 10 males. Then you have the sepals and the petals, which now act as a guide for pollination. Now, the next thing is numbers of various parts of that flower, numbers of their various parts. We take an instance with that of the NonEssential, which is flamboyant. And flamboyant is the one usually used during a WAEC exam. Now you can see that the petal is 5. Petal is 5, but if you're drawing a half flower, it will be 2.5. Sepal 5. And the color of the petal is red, brightly colored red, while the sepal is red inside and green outside. Then filament is 10, while pistil is 1. Now, these parts of the flowers have various functions. We have to take a look at their functions. Pedicel attaches the flower to the shoots. The pedicel attaches the flower to the shoots, while receptacle carries and holds together the other parts of the flower. Carries and holds together the other parts of the flower. As some of them look like a cup. While sepals encloses the other parts of the flower when the flower is in bud stage. What do I mean by flower being in bud stage? Before the flower opens and the petals now comes out, you can see the sepal encloses them. By then, that is the bud stage. They are enclosed. But when the sepals break open through the lines, then that is what is no longer on bud stage. Then another function of the sepal is that some of them used to be brightly colored, and because of that, they attract insects for pollination. Then, since their backs used to be green in color, they equally help in photosynthesis. Then petals. The functions include it attracts what? Insects for pollination because they are usually brightly colored. They are usually brightly colored. Petal for alamander is always a yellow, and that is bright yellow. Now, filament holds up the anther. The anther is always at the tip of the filament, and it holds it in such a position that if it is air pollinated flowers or wind pollinated flowers, air or wind pollinated flowers or insect pollinated flowers, it now makes the pollen grain available for that kind of pollination. So the filament holds the anther in position. Now, what is the anther? Anther contains the pollen grain. Pollen grain. What is the pollen grain? Pollen grain is the male gamete that fertilizes the ovule in the ovary. Now, nectary tube. We have nectary tube. Nectary tube secretes nectar. Nectar is the juice in the flowers that when insects go looking for the nectar, in the attempt to get to the nectary tube, they now dust their body with what? With pollen grain. Then that pollen grain will be dusted on the stigma. Through that process, pollination occurs. Now, pollen grain give rise to male gamete that fertilizes the ovules. Now, what is style? In the female part, you have the style. The style connects the stigma to the ovary. The style connects the stigma to the ovary, and also pollen tube grows through it to reach the ovary. That's after fertilization. The pollen tube grows through the style so that the male gamete is able to reach the what? Is able to reach the ovules. Now, what is stigma? Stigma receives pollen grain at pollination. Stigma does the function of receiving the pollen grain at pollination. That's why some of the stigmas, or most of the stigmas, are usually what? Sticky. They are sticky, so that whenever the pollen grain drops on it, they stick onto the pollen grain until pollen tube is formed. Now, the next one is ovary. Ovary contain ovules, and that ovary later develop into fruits. The ovule, within the ovary, you have the ovules. So after fertilization and the development of the fruits, you now discover that the ovary now develops into fruits, while the ovules inside it develop into seeds. For example, now the ovary of mango or the ovary of orange, after developing, gets big, ripe, then you pluck it and eat. It is the ovary that now developing into that fruit. But the seed that you now throw away while eating the fruit is what? The ovule, which now develop into seed. Now we have the last one, which is the ovules. Ovules contain the female gametes, and that is the one that's equally developed into seed after fertilization. Okay, I hope you're following. Now, the next thing is some of the terms used in describing flower. Some terms used in describing flowers. We have terms like unisexual or bisexual flower. When we say that a flower is unisexual, it then means that that flower contains only the male or the female parts, not both of them. When a flower contains only the male or the female parts of a flower, that is when we say that the flower is unisexual. We have such examples as purple and the maize. Then when we say that a flower is bisexual, or you say it is a hermaphrodite flower or a perfect flower, it is when it contains both male and female parts of the flower. That's when it contains both stamens and the pistil. That's the male and the female reproductive parts are present in that flower. Then we say it is a hermaphrodite flower or bisexual flower or a perfect flower. The unisexual flower is equally known as the imperfect flower because they contain only either male or female parts, which I've given you example as purple. But example of bisexual flower include pride of Barbados. Then we have another term like complete and incomplete flowers. When a flower is said to be complete, it then means that it contains all the walls of a flower, that all the floral walls are present in that flower. For example, sepal is present, petal is present, gynoecium is present, and androecium is present. But a flower is said to be incomplete when one or two of these parts are lacking. The flower may lack stamen, the flower may lack petal or sepal. Then we say that that flower is what? Incomplete. Then the next thing is regular and the irregular flowers. Regular and irregular flowers. When a flower is regular, it then means that all the petals are of the same size, shape, and the same color. In that case, you can have a half flower. You can cut your half flower in any dimension in that kind of flower. The regular flower. When we say that flower is regular, it then means that all the petals are the same in shape, size, and the same color as well. Then you can make your half flower through any plane. You cut a half flower through any plane or any dimension. But when a flower is irregular, that is when all the petals are not the same. You may have one of the petals quite different from the rest, and that's one that is not the same with the rest is called standard petal, or you call it kill petal. Kill petal, Q-U-I-L-L. An example of an irregular flower is flamboyant flower, which we call Delonis regae. When you pick up a flamboyant flower, you observe that 4 out of the 5 are red, but 1 out of the 5 is always used to be white or somehow dotted with red and the white. So that makes it to be different, and that makes it to be a standard or kill petal. And because of that, flamboyant is an irregular flower. Whereas a flower like hibiscus is a regular flower, because you observe that all the petals are of the same shape, size, and color. Then the next term is essential and the non-essential parts of the flower. Essential parts of the flower are the parts that are directly concerned with reproduction. They produce gametes for fertilization. And the essential parts include the stamens and the pistils, that's the male and the female parts. While the non-essential parts are the parts that are not directly involved in the formation of gametes. And the example include sepal and the petals. Now, the next term is solitary flowers. Solitary flower is a flower that is attached singly, either to the leaf axis or to the tip of a branch. Example is hibiscus. You find out that hibiscus used to be single, one, wherever it develops on the branch or at the tip of the axis. While inflorescence is a group of flowers attached to a common stalk or axis. So example is Pride of Barbados. You see that when you get to a flower of plant of Pride of Barbados, you now discover that the flowers are always in bunch at a particular tip. That is what we mean by inflorescence. By hibiscus occurs singly, that is solitary. Now we have the next terms, which is a hypogynous flower. Hypogynous flower. We have some flowers that have dome-shaped receptacles with the carpel at the top. That's the carpel, means that the female part is at the top of that receptacle. Then you have the stamens and the petals radiating underneath the ovary. Now, this kind of flower is said to be hypogynous, and that kind of ovary that is seated or that is sitting on the receptacle is called superior ovary. We have examples as in hibiscus or marigold flower. Then we have epigynous flower. Epigynous flower has its receptacles cup-shaped, and the receptacle completely encloses the ovary, with other floral parts like the stamens and the petals radiating from the receptacle, which hides the ovary. So the ovary is said to be inferior because it is within, it is covered by the receptacle, which is cup-shaped. But you can see that in hypogynous flower, it is exposed, the ovary is seated above. But in epigynous, the ovary is hidden within that cup-shaped receptacle. And we have example of the epigynous flower as guava and the sunflower. And the ovary is said to be inferior ovary. Then we have the perigynous flower. In perigynous flower, the receptacle can be saucer-shaped or cup-shaped, but the main thing is that the carpels radiate from the center, and the other floral parts equally radiate from the center on the outer rim of the receptacle, meaning that from the midge, it is halfly hidden and halfly exposed. So in that type, we have example as a rose flower. We have rose flower, that is perigynous flower. Okay, I hope you're following. Now these are all about terms of flowers, terms used in describing flowers. I hope it's well understood, and I'll evaluate you with the following questions. Number 1, what is flower? 2, list 5 whorls of a flower. When I mean whorls, I mean parts of flower. 3, draw and label half flower of Delaunay's regae. Delaunay's regae is flamboyant flower. 4, list the numbers of the label parts. If you know those parts you labeled, state their numbers of that particular flower. It varies from flowers to flower. 5, state the functions of the following parts of the flower. State the functions of the following parts of the flower. 1, pollen grains. 2, petals. 3, filaments. Then number 6 question. List 5 terms used in describing flowers. List 5 terms used in describing flowers. I'm waiting for your reply in my WhatsApp number or contact, which is 080-55-408-297. Thanks for listening, and I appreciate your reply in the first lesson. So I hope, and I'm waiting for your reply this time around. Bye.